Good evening, students. Welcome to a very important session on the IBPS SO IT officer interviews. So, I'm assuming all of you are IT officers or wannabe IT officers, future IT officers. And this session will focus exclusively on the IT officer interview. Yesterday, I had conducted a session for the AFO interviews. I wanted to conduct, or rather, I want to conduct separate sessions for IT officer interviews, marketing officer interviews, and agricultural field officer interviews because although the general questions are common, but there are many differences as well in these interviews. And mostly those differences arise when you move on to the technical questions or questions based on your academics. That's why I decided to conduct this special session for candidates who are appearing for the IT officer interviews. So good evening, Shashikant, Ashish, Rishabh. Yes. So good to see all of you. Please comment. Please say something in the comments section. Okay, so let's move on. That's my introduction. My name is Abhishek Gaike. I have a BE in computer science and engineering. So I'm a computer engineer myself. And I did my PGDB in banking. I used to work in ICICI Bank at its head office in Bandra Kurla Complex, Mumbai, in the Global Markets Group in foreign exchange, ICICI Treasury. I was selected as an officer in State Bank of India, State Bank of Hyderabad, Punjab National Bank, Bank of Baroda, LIC, National Insurance, etc. I was also selected in the Reserve Bank of India with an All India rank of 6. I cleared SSC CGL with an All India rank of 49, and I have more than 12 years of experience in bank and SSC coaching. So that's my introduction. We'll move on to the interview part now. So main part. I'll talk about the documents as well. Yes. Yes, Rishabh, you can mention your experience in the biodata form. So this is a very important thing you should keep in mind. There are two things that the interview panel has based on which the panel members can ask you questions. One is your application form. The other is your biodata form. You don't have to carry a biodata or resume with you. You're given a printed form and you have to just fill it in with proper information. So your name, your education, your hobbies, your work experience, if any, you can mention it there. So even if you've not mentioned your work experience in the application form, you can mention it in the biodata form. If at all you're asked why you didn't mention it in the application form, you can simply say, I did not have the work experience certificate at that time, or maybe I thought it wasn't relevant, or maybe because this position does not require any work experience, that's why I did not bother to fill it in. You can give any of these answers. The first one is much better. Good evening, Bhav Sahib. I hope you're happy in UCO Bank. It's a very good bank, and you're in Bede, so I'm happy because there are many students of mine from Bede who are now placed across banks in many parts of the country. So good to see you. Okay, I was just going through your comments. Let's move on to more important things. So there are 4 categories of questions, broadly speaking, in the IT officer interview. First, personal questions, which I'm going to cover today in this session. Then questions on banking awareness, which will be covered by Nikhil sir in the interview batch in case you want to join. GK and current affairs will also be covered by Nikhil sir in the interview batch. But this is not, I mean, if you're well aware of the happenings in the world, if you're comfortable with banking concepts, if you can give one-line definitions, I think you're more than set for the interview. You're prepared. You just need to be well-read, aware of what's happening around you, be well-versed with basic concepts in banking and finance. And then this part, the IT computer part, I'll briefly discuss about this part at the end of the session. Please feel free to post your questions in the comments section. I'm constantly looking at the comments box to go through your comments and just reply to relevant questions. Yes, there could be questions related to computers and IT. Although you've cleared the main exam, the major hurdle is over. pass the main hurdle, but you can expect a few questions on database management systems, data structures, computer networks, and information security. Just a few minutes ago, I was talking to a student who's currently working as an IT officer, and he told me that there could be questions on endpoint security or cloud security. So you should know what these concepts mean. You should be able to give simple definitions. In case you're asked a situation-based question related to IT, you should be able to tactfully answer such questions. It should have a practical touch rather than very theoretical, bookish answers. If possible, try to give practical answers. For example, suppose you're working as an IT officer and you have to secure data on a local computer. What are the steps you can take? So maybe you can back it up on an external drive, you can encrypt it, you can password protect it, or maybe you can upload it to a secure cloud, a secure space in the cloud. So all these things can be done. This is actually done practically in real life, in banks, in any organization for that matter. So these are the steps you can take. So these are all practical answers, good answers that will impress the interview panel. Mahesh, it's okay. You can appear for the interview either in English or Hindi. I would recommend sticking to just one language. In case you're not very comfortable with English, you can use some Hindi in between. You can ask for permission first. You should ask for permission first. So may I please answer this question in Hindi or Marathi? Usually Hindi is okay. Marathi, probably not all of them would understand. I'm assuming you're from Maharashtra. That's why I gave the option of Marathi. But you can ask for permission. Sir, may I please answer this question in Hindi? If yes, if they say yes, in most cases they do, you can continue answering in Hindi. Anyway, I hope you have all the documents, semester-wise mark sheets, your 10th, 12th certificate mark sheets, your Aadhaar card. Students who have applied from OBC and EWS categories should have a certificate issued in this financial year, preferably in the central government format. Candidates who don't have their degree certificates should have a provisional degree certificate. Work experience certificate is not compulsory. If you're working in a government, semi-government, quasi-government organization or a government department, you need an NOC that needs to be submitted before the interview. Only then will you be allowed to appear for the interview. So I hope these things are already clear. You must have done your own research. I'll move directly to the questions. So personal questions. We'll talk about the personal questions first, and then I'll touch upon technical questions, IT, computer related questions. So tell me about yourself, introduce yourself, basic introduction. I'll give my own introduction, and then you can modify it as per your requirements. Okay, sample answer. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, sirs. My name is Abhishek Gaike. I come from a small village called Dinwara in the Gangapur Taluka of Aurangabad district. I completed my BE in Computer Science and Engineering from MIT College Aurangabad in 2017. For the next 2 years, I worked as a junior software developer in Island Software Systems, Pune. I'm very hardworking and disciplined. I enjoy traveling and listening to music in my free time. I've represented my college and university at the state and national level in inter-university and intercollegiate cricket tournaments. I want to become a successful IT officer in a public sector bank. That's it. So I mentioned 2 hobbies. I mentioned my strengths. I'm very hardworking and disciplined. These are my strengths. I enjoy traveling and listening to music in my free time. These are my hobbies. Any special achievement should also be mentioned. So I represented my college and university in many intercollegiate and inter-university tournaments, cricket tournaments at the state and national level. And I should mention my work experience as well. So I worked for 2 years. I worked as a junior. I mentioned my position as a junior software developer or an Android developer, whatever your position is, in the name of the company in Island Software Systems, Pune. So all these things should be mentioned. I also, because I have a rural background, I should mention my village and taluka name as well. It usually creates a good positive impression because you've come from a rural area, you worked in the IT industry, or you have a computer science degree, and generally someone who comes from a small town or a village is flexible in terms of posting. So that candidate is generally ready to move anywhere in the country. Typically, candidates who've been born and brought up in big cities, metro cities, aren't very comfortable moving to smaller cities or district places. So as an IT officer, generally, you would be working in big cities, but if you mention your village as well, that shows your roots. So you have rural roots. It's generally considered a positive side. Although whether that would translate into actual marks, some gain or edge in the interview, I'm not sure, but it's a good sign. Electronics, okay, yes. If you're an electronics graduate, you might not be comfortable with questions on IT. So a common question to non-IT, non-computer graduates, typically electronics graduates, is being an electronics graduate, why do you want to join the bank as an IT officer? Because you're an electronics graduate, you're not a computer graduate, you're not an IT graduate. So why do you want to become an IT officer? And if you're interested in IT, why did you choose electronics as your field of graduation in the first place? So in your first year, you chose electronics. Now, after graduation, after getting a BTech in electronics and telecommunications, you want to join a bank as an IT officer. Why? So you should have a good, proper answer. If you have work experience, a lot of questions could be asked about your work experience. We'll cover all these things. So I just gave the answer to the first question. I'll repeat it once, only once. If there is a female panel member, a lady, wish her first, and then for others, just use the plural form, sirs. So good evening, ma'am. Good evening, sirs. My name is Abhishek Gaike. I come from a small village called Dinwada in the Gangapur Taluka of Aurangabad district. I completed my BE in Computer Science and Engineering from MIT College Aurangabad in 2017. For the next 2 years, I worked as a junior software developer in Island Software Systems, Pune. I'm very hardworking and disciplined. I enjoy traveling and listening to music in my free time. I've represented my college and university in many cricket tournaments at the state and national level. I want to become a successful IT officer in a public sector bank. That's it. That's my introduction. Akshay, generally you're not given coding questions, programming questions in the IBPS SO IT officer interviews. Generally speaking, I have actually never heard anyone I know a lot of candidates who've appeared for the IT officer interviews over the last 7, 8 years. And I've never heard anyone being given an actual coding question during the interview. So you could be asked questions on programming, but you probably wouldn't be asked to code or write a program in the interview. Your programming knowledge or your coding knowledge is not very relevant at this stage. So they don't want to test it now. Even when you join the bank, you don't have to program or code, generally speaking. That's done by vendors, software vendors. So banks impanel software vendors. These vendors design software, and you just have to act as sort of a liaison, as a communication link between bankers and the software vendor. You don't have to program, actually code in the bank when you join as an IT officer. Anyway, moving on. What's your family background? So again, this depends. This is a very personal question in the sense I won't be able to give a general answer. I'm just giving one sample answer. Someone coming from a rural area, maybe his father is a farmer. So I'll give you an answer. My father is a farmer. My mother is a housewife. She helps my father in the farm. I have an elder brother who's currently unemployed. He also helps my father in the farm. I have a younger sister who's currently pursuing BCom. She's in a final year of graduation. We own 3.5 acres of land. It is not irrigated. We grow cotton and soybean in it. That's it. So I gave relevant details. My father is a farmer, my mother is a housewife, she helps my father in the farm. Elder brother, unemployed, he also helps my father in the farm. And this is our land and this is what we cultivate in it. If suppose my father works in some company, I can say, my father works as a junior engineer in XYZ Private Limited, Pune. My mother is a teacher in a private school. I have a younger brother who's currently pursuing computer engineering or who is currently in his third year of engineering. I have an elder sister who's married and settled in Nasik. That's it. So I gave my father's position. He works as a junior engineer and the name of the company in XYZ Private Limited, Pune. My mother is a teacher in a private school. I can also name the school. My mother is a teacher in Holy Cross English School. It's a private school. I have a younger sister who is in a third year of engineering at Government Engineering College, Aurangabad. My elder brother works as an Android developer in Infosys Technologies, Bangalore. I'm just giving examples. So give the relevant details, position and the name of the company. That's it. That should be a family background. You can merge your family information in your introduction, but I wouldn't advise doing that. So tell me about yourself is all about yourself, your hobbies, your strengths, and family background is a separate question. Then gap. I'll just go through your questions first. Questions for experienced candidates. Yes, Swapnil will cover it. Just give me a few minutes. Government job preparation for a year or two for question. Yes. So see, if there is a gap of 1 or 2 years, it's acceptable. But a gap of 4, 5, 6 years is a big gap. If you haven't been doing anything during the last 5, 6 years, it would be difficult to explain why you took so long to clear bank exams. So you should say you were doing something. Maybe after graduation, you worked in a local computer shop because you did not get a decent job offer. Maybe you searched for a job in, I'm from Maharashtra, so I'm giving examples by naming cities in Maharashtra. So after graduation, I searched for a job in Pune and Mumbai, even in Hyderabad. Unfortunately, I could not get a decent job. I graduated from a small private engineering college. There were no campus placements available. Off campus, I searched for a job in Mumbai, Pune, and Hyderabad. Unfortunately, I could not get a decent job because you can say maybe you can say this if actually your marks are low. You can say, sir, actually my aggregate is 56.25%, and almost all IT companies ask for 60% aggregate during engineering to be eligible. The eligibility criteria for the interview or campus placements is 60%. So because I did not have 60% aggregate in my graduation, I wasn't eligible for many campus placements or off-campus placement drives. That is why I came back to my hometown and started preparing for competitive exams. Meanwhile, I joined a local software company as a software developer, or maybe I worked in a local computer shop part-time, installing software on new computers and also repairing hardware and software, troubleshooting software problems on older computers and laptops. Something like this. So you were doing something. So you were doing it part-time. And the remaining time, you were actually studying for bank exams. Yes, Avnish, you should mention about your sister. Father is a banker. Yes, please mention. My father works, if your father works in a bank, my father works as a branch manager in Central Bank of India or ICICI Bank, something like this. Ashish, I've already said you can appear for the interview in English or Hindi. And if you can't answer in English during the interview, please ask for permission. Sir, may I please answer this question in Hindi? Most probably they'll say yes. Usually they say yes. And you can say thank you, sir, and then continue in Hindi. Rishabh, yes. If you haven't scored good marks during engineering, you need to have a justification. Why did you not score good marks in engineering? Why is your aggregate just 56%? So you need a good enough reason. So I won't deal with very personal questions, profile based questions, because this is a general session and these very specific profile questions, profile based questions won't be helpful to all. So I won't discuss those things. I'm just giving you a general idea. We can discuss these very specific profile based questions during our one-on-one counseling sessions and mock interviews in the interview batch. But the purpose of this session is to give you a broad idea as well as point you in the right direction. I'll also give you a few sample answers. You can modify those answers as per your requirements, as per your profile, and design a very unique answer that represents a good picture, that shows off your good qualities. So anyway, so that's it. You graduated in 2017. What have you been doing for the last 5 years? So after my graduation, I searched for a job off campus for 6 to 8 months. I couldn't find a decent job. I came back to Aurangabad and I started working part-time in a local computer shop. And in the remaining time, I started my preparation for bank exams. Now, why specifically banking? Why don't you join? Why don't you find a job in the IT sector? I've already explained. So, sir, my percentage is low. Most companies off-campus recruitments ask for a minimum aggregate of 60% to be eligible for the off-campus placement drives. So I'm not eligible for most of these recruitments. That is why I decided to focus on government recruitment exams where the criteria for percentage and marks are not strict. And why banking specifically? So banking is a booming sector. There are many opportunities available in this sector. If I get selected as an IT officer in a public sector bank, I can get a very good salary, many facilities and allowances. But most importantly, I will get social respect. Bank exams are easier as compared to other competitive exams like UPSC and state civil services exams. The recruitment process is quick and transparent and based purely on merit. Being a computer engineer, I was already comfortable with subjects like quantitative aptitude, logical reasoning, and computer knowledge. That is why I focused on bank exams, more specifically on IBPS SO exams. Avnish, then you'll have to, if you have scored 70% aggregate, you'll need some other answer. That's what I'm saying. It's very difficult for me to answer all your queries, especially if they're very profile specific. But I'll give you general answers. I'm pointing you in the right direction. I'm giving you general answers. You'll have to modify these answers a bit as per your requirements, as per your profile. Moving on. So these are the personal questions. Then questions on fathers, even mothers and siblings' profession. Suppose your father works in a bank. You could be asked about your father's work. Which branch does he work in? So which bank, which branch? What is the position of the branch? What is the CASA? What is the NPA percentage? What is the size of the loan book? Then overall information about that particular bank. Suppose your father works in Bank of Maharashtra, but your first preference is Bank of Baroda. Bank of Maharashtra is maybe at the 10th or 11th position. You could be asked to justify your decision. So questions on preference order as well. Why did you put Bank of Baroda as your first preference? Why did you put Punjab National Bank as your first preference? So if you've given the preference order, simply looking at the vacancies, you can give this answer. Sir, I looked at the vacancies and I arranged the banks in descending order of vacancies, which is, by the way, not the right way to do it. You should never look at the vacancies while giving the preference order. Your own preferences as well as the bank's reputation and your future in the bank, the facilities, allowances, growth within that particular bank should be considered while giving the preference order. So the good banks, Bank of Baroda, Punjab National Bank, Canara Bank, should be placed at the top, generally speaking. But if you place them in any other order, you should be able to justify your decision. The best way to answer this question is, sir, I actually searched the internet for a good preference order. I think all are public sector banks, they're all good banks, and I would be happy to join any of these banks. But because giving a preference order was compulsory in order to submit the form, I had to give it. Otherwise, I have no problem working even in the bank which I've mentioned as the last preference. So suppose you've mentioned UCO Bank as your last preference. And you could be asked, suppose you're selected as an IT officer in UCO Bank, will you join this bank? You should say, of course, I would be happy to. Then why did you put it as your last preference? Sir, actually, I think all these are public sector banks, the salary is the same. But since I had no in-depth knowledge of all these, I did not have in-depth knowledge of all these banks, I simply searched for a good preference order online. Or maybe I took the help of my friend who's currently working as a probationary officer in Bank of Baroda. And he gave me this preference order. So follow-up questions are avoided. My friend who's currently working in a bank, or some uncle who's working in a bank, gave this preference order. It's not my preference order. I took it from someone else. So that way you can avoid cross questions or follow-up questions. Then questions on noteworthy achievements. So maybe, sorry, I was talking about this part first. Your father's profession or sibling's profession. Maybe your father works as a police officer. Why didn't you join the police force then? If your father works in the army, why didn't you follow your father's footsteps? Don't you want to serve the nation? So you can say, sir, that joining the army isn't the only way to serve the nation. There are many other ways to serve the country. Even by working in a public sector bank, I would be contributing to the Indian economy. I would be serving the people, the society, and the nation in general, because these are public sector banks. The profits these banks make go to the public, go to the government. This is also a way to serve the country by playing my small part in the growth of the Indian economy. Simple answer. You should modify it. You can modify it, and you should modify it. Use simple words, say things you're comfortable saying. You should sound confident. So if you memorize someone else's answers, you will fumble, you may not sound confident. It is likely that you might forget some of these answers. So the best strategy is to actually design your own answers, frame your own answers rather than memorizing what someone else has said. Now, questions on noteworthy achievements. Suppose you were awarded the best employee prize in your company. That's a noteworthy achievement. Maybe you represented your college and university at the national level. You're a classical singer, you're a trained classical singer, and you've participated in Indian Idol or Saregamapa. This is a noteworthy achievement, a notable achievement. You should mention these things in your introduction. If the panel members don't ask for your introduction, you should mention it somewhere else. Wherever possible, you should point out that you have achieved this thing in life. So maybe you represented India in Junior Olympics. Just giving an example. That's a huge achievement. But even small things. You were part of the district cricket team. You work for an NGO. You're a part of an NGO. Or maybe you formed your own NGO that works for spreading financial awareness among the poor and backward people in your region. That's a big achievement. So you can mention these things and be prepared to answer questions based on these. Any other questions? Father passed away. Avnish, you can say my father passed away in 2010 due to cancer. He met with an accident and he passed away in 2010. Whatever the reason. Then moving on. Questions about your name. Suppose your name is Ganesh. This is an actual interview question or incident that happened. one of my students is named Ganesh. It's a very common name all over India, in Maharashtra as well. And he was asked, Ganesh, why did your parents name you Ganesh? Are they devotees of Lord Ganesha? So he said, yes, sir, I was born on Ganesh Chaturthi. That's why I was named Ganesh, and my parents and grandparents are devotees of Lord Ganesh. So the next question was, Ganesh, give 5 other names of Lord Ganesh. Now it's very easy: Gajanan, Ganapati, Ekdant, Gajamukh, etc. But while sitting in front of the interview panel, my student did not expect this question. He wasn't even able to give a single name. So if there's an unexpected question, you're caught off guard. That's why you should do a lot of introspection. Think about all the possible questions that could be asked, looking at your application form and your biodata form, your profile. What kind of follow-up questions could be asked based on your answers to those questions, previous questions, and prepare for those questions. Prepare good answers to those questions. Most of the questions are predictable. In case you come across an unpredictable question, if you're asked something that you haven't prepared for, give it your best shot. Try to answer the question tactfully if it's an unexpected question. If you have absolutely no idea, you can simply say, sorry sir, I have no idea. That's it. Moving on, gaps in education. Yes, we've already covered this. If there's a gap, you need to explain. By gap, actually, I haven't covered it. Actually, by gap, I mean, let's say you completed your 10th standard SSC in 2010, but you completed your 12th in 2014. So what happened? Instead of completing your HSC in 2012, you completed in 2014. And maybe you completed your engineering in 2019. So 5 years have passed. Why did you take 5 years? Maybe you failed in your 3rd year of engineering. Why? So you need to give reasons. It's not compulsory, that it's not necessary that you would be asked these questions. Maybe they won't notice your gap if it's just a 1 year gap. But still, it's better to be prepared. Yes. So Shivangi, yes, good question. So because your name is Shivangi, you could be asked about various temples of Lord Shivji. If neither UG nor PG have the job experiences in computers by IT. Rishabh, you'll have to frame a good answer to that question. I was always interested in computers, IT, technology in general. However, when I wanted to pursue engineering in the college of my choice, all the seats for computer engineering were full. So the next best thing was electronics for me. The cutoff for computer engineering seats was higher than that for electronics engineering. So I couldn't get a seat in the computer engineering branch. That's why I took admission to electronics engineering. But my interest in computers and IT never disappeared. It was always there. So when I got an opportunity to appear for the IT officer exam, when I came to know that even electronics engineers can appear for IT officer exams, I started preparing for this exam by reading up on various topics on computers and IT. That's how you can justify your decision to appear for this exam. Moving on. Now, another important question. Preparation strategy for exam and interview. How did you prepare for this exam? How did you prepare for this interview? Generally speaking, in any bank interview, bank or insurance interview, never ever mention that you took coaching, training, guidance from a teacher. You took guidance from a senior in college who's now working as an IT officer or a PO in XYZ bank. Maybe one of your relatives or neighbors works in a public sector bank. So you took guidance for them for the interview. For the exam, I referred to many, I watched videos on many YouTube channels, good YouTube channels, good videos on channels like Adda 247, Unacademy, Byju's Exam Prep, etc. I watched a few mock interviews on YouTube for this IT officer exam. I read newspapers regularly. I'm well read. I'm aware of the happenings around the world. And I studied some topics on computers. However, I did not do any kind of special preparation for the interview. I spoke to my friend a couple of times. He works as a clerk in Bank of Baroda. That's it. Now, why should you give this answer? If you say you actually took coaching from someone trained you, the panel members might assume whatever you're saying is not sincere. Someone has coached you, someone has trained you, someone has given you these answers. These are not yours. Whereas if you say you did self-study, this was all self-preparation, you watched YouTube videos, you took some guidance from your friends and seniors, that's it. That shows you're hardworking, you're a go-getter, you're proactive, and these are all sincere, genuine answers. So this candidate must have natural talent. That's the kind of impression you create in the minds of the panel members. So always say that you prepare on your own, self-study, that's it. Any other questions? Captain, I asked you already. Yes. See, Akshay, if you're working in a software company or any company for that matter, you will be asked to justify why do you see. So possible questions. Why, if you wanted to work in a bank, why did you join a private IT company in the first place? You could have immediately appeared for IT officer exams. Okay, so you joined an IT company. What do you do there? What's your job profile? Then, why do you want to leave that job and join a bank? Next question, in what way will your experience in XYZ company be useful while working as an IT officer? Will it be useful? If yes, how? So you're working as a software developer in Capgemini. So how will that experience be useful in a public sector bank when you join as an IT officer? What kind of work do you do? Which platforms do you use? What platform do you work on? What kind of technology do you deal with? And you could be asked technical questions based on that. So I remember someone from Delhi was working as an Android developer in a local software company in Gurgaon or Delhi, I think Delhi NCR. And he was asked, number one, you're working as an Android developer. So, but how will you improve our bank's app? So he was being interviewed by bank officers from some public sector bank. I don't remember the exact name of the bank. So how will you improve our app? You're an Android developer. What suggestions can you give? And this guy had absolutely no idea. So he said, no, sir, I'm just a programmer. I don't work in design. Okay, then. How will your experience be useful when you join as an IT officer? Then questions on Android. So compare Android and iOS in terms of functionality, in terms of security, efficiency, whatever. So based on your job role, job profile, you could be asked certain questions. You're the best person to predict the kind of questions that could be asked. Niharika, I'm very sorry. There's no special session as such for HR officer preparation, but I'll be happy to help. You can post your queries in the comments section even after this video, and I'll try my best to answer all your questions. Anyway, moving on. We've already discussed questions on preference order. Now, what is a public sector bank? What are the differences between public sector banks and private banks? Again, this is not a personal or HR based question, not a question based on your profile, but just general information. Please prepare your answers to these questions. Not AFO. I actually copied the PPT from the AFO session. So what is the job profile of an IT officer? What is the job profile of an IT officer in a bank? So an IT officer works as a liaison, as a link between bankers and software vendors. In fact, his primary duty pertains to computer networking and information security. There's a concept called endpoint security. So he has to ensure endpoint security, cloud security. He has to secure all the data. He has to ensure proper access. So admin roles, access control within the bank, system administration. That is also the work of the IT officer. An IT officer, generally speaking, isn't expected to design software for the bank or repair hardware. That work is given to external agencies. So there are software vendors, hardware vendors, contracts are given for IT help desk, IT troubleshooting. An IT officer, a full-time employee of the bank, isn't generally supposed to do these things. The main job of an IT officer is to ensure endpoint security, security of the data, ensure proper access control within the bank. So there are many systems, multiple systems. So assigning roles, admin, manager, taking care of the security of the data, integrity of the data. This is the main work of an IT officer in a bank. If I just use one word, it's security. Security of the data, security of the systems, and proper access control. Yes. There could be questions on the budget as well. I'm just talking about the general things first. This is an important question. Which other exams have you appeared for? And see, why don't you appear for the IBPS PO exam? Why do you want to join as an IT officer? Most of you probably have appeared for the IBPS PO exam. So you can either hide this fact or you can mention it. You can say, sir, I've appeared for IBPS PO, RRB PO, but my main focus has always been the IT officer exam because I would prefer working or joining the bank as an IT officer rather than a probationary officer. Why? Because I'm a very technical person. I would love to work in IT within the bank. Also, if I join the bank as an IT officer, I would be posted in big cities or district places at the minimum. I wouldn't be expected to serve in villages. And I'm not very comfortable working in rural areas. I can live in cities, even towns, but I would prefer working in metropolitan cities or big cities. And as an IT officer, this is possible, but it's simply not possible working as a probationary officer. As a PO, I will have to work in rural as well as urban areas. But more important than that, I think I'm very technically inclined, I'm very tech savvy, and I would like to utilize my technical knowledge for the benefit of the bank. So again, a sample answer, you should modify it as per your requirements. And so which other exams have you appeared for? What if you're selected as a PO as well as an SO? What will you do? So of course, sir, I'll join as an IT officer. For reasons, you can give reasons. I've mentioned the reasons earlier. So IT officers work in big cities, district places. They don't work in taluka places or villages. District places, usually big cities or metropolitan cities. Typically, IT officers have 5-day work weeks because they work in regional centers, regional offices, zonal offices. Usually, they have 5-day work week. So you can mention that as well. And you're comfortable sitting in front of the computer for hours together. There is very little public interaction for an IT officer, whereas a PO has to do lots of interactions with the public, general public. So you can say, I would prefer sitting in front of a computer, dealing with a few people, rather than interacting with the general public throughout the day. There's nothing wrong with it, but I think looking at my personality, the job profile of an IT officer is more suitable for me. So less public contact, more of a desk job, office job, postings mostly in big cities, metropolitan cities, and usually a 5-day work week. However, you do have to report to the bank, stay in the bank overnight as well sometimes. So you have to work in shifts. A few of my students have night shifts working in their respective public sector banks. So this is not working as a PO, you'll never have to work in the night shift. But as an IT officer, it's quite possible. Rishabh, you can say so. Of course, if you don't remember what you did just a few years ago, that's a negative sign. Then what are your views on privatization, merger of public sector banks? In general, in any government bank interview, whether it's IBPS SO or IBPS PO or RRB PO, never ever support privatization. The people who are conducting your interviews are employees of public sector banks, and most of them are against privatization. So when they're conducting the interview, you're sitting in front of them and you're supporting privatization. You're talking about the advantages of privatization. Imagine what they'll think about you. So that will be in direct contrast to their ideology. So considering this fact, never support privatization. You can talk about, you can give many reasons against privatization, opposing privatization. So for example, private banks were nationalized in 1969 and 1980 with a few goals in mind: ensuring equitable access to financial services, financial inclusion, ensuring that various government schemes reach the poor and the needy, ensuring that the socially and economically backward classes are brought into the mainstream. None of these goals have been comprehensively achieved. So public sector banks need to be there, because once a bank is privatized, it will work solely for profit. Whereas public sector banks, apart from earning profits, work for the greater good. They work for the welfare of the society, for the growth of the Indian economy. They have very broad objectives, larger objectives. They don't think in the narrow terms of simply earning profits for the bank. All public sector banks are operationally profitable. And when we talk about NPAs, it's not the fault of the employees. Most of the employees are simply following orders from above. The big scams, you could be asked about the ABG shipyard scam. Big scams like the Nirav Modi scam or the recent ABG shipyard scam have happened because of the collusion of politicians and top management in banks. There is a lot of political pressure to give loans to less credit-worthy citizens or people. So on the one hand, the government expects the banks to implement social welfare schemes such as the Mudra loan scheme, which has almost 97-98% loans are NPAs under this scheme. So there are many such schemes in which the loans have turned NPAs. So on the one hand, the government expects banks to implement these schemes, and on the other hand, in the same breath, the government says the banks should earn profits without increasing NPAs. That's not possible. So I can talk about this for the next 15-20 minutes, but you should be able to give at least 4 or 5 reasons why privatization is not a good thing for the Indian banking sector. Why public sector banks should not be privatized. So you can mention there could be a few advantages, but mostly there are disadvantages. This decision to privatize public sector banks would be disastrous, and I don't think it's the right decision. So you should support what those bankers are thinking. You should be in agreement with their views. Chances of questions related to graduation and post-graduation project. Yes, possible. You could be asked questions related to your project, but you need to mention your project somewhere. If you haven't mentioned anywhere, still you could be asked questions. What was your final year project all about? What was your postgraduate project all about? You should be able to speak for 30-40 seconds. Moving on. Now questions on your hobbies. Another important thing, are you willing to work anywhere in India? So although you would be posted in big cities or metropolitan cities, this question is possible. If suppose you're a North Indian, you're from UP or Bihar, you could be asked, are you comfortable working in South India? What if we post you in Thiruvananthapuram or Chennai? Will you work there? So you can see, you should say, yes, of course. If you're a South Indian, are you comfortable working in North India? Let's say we post you in Lucknow or Kanpur or Patna. Will you go there? How will you adjust to the life there? So first of all, always say you're ready to work anywhere in the country. You would prefer working in metropolitan cities or big cities, but you're ready to work anywhere. So for example, I'll give you the answer. Uh, are you willing to work anywhere in the country? Yes, of course, sir. India is such a diverse country with different cultures, customs, cuisines, traditions. I was born and brought up in Aurangabad. I've spent the first 25 years of my life here. So I would love to experience the rich diversity that our country has to offer. In fact, if I'm selected, my first choice would be to work in a state other than Maharashtra, preferably in a big city in the north or south of India. So just an example. Women, female candidates could be asked this question. Will your parents allow you to work outside your home state? What if your husband or in-laws don't allow you to work outside your state? So girls can say, sir, of course, my parents have always been very supportive and they want to see me successful professionally and personally. So that won't be a problem. And as far as marriage is concerned, I don't plan to get married for the next couple of years. After that, when my parents start searching for a soulmate for me, I would make one thing very clear to the prospective groom, that I worked very hard to get this job in a public sector bank. This is my dream job. And there is absolutely no way I would consider leaving my job or resigning from my job. And my job involves transfers to different parts of the country, albeit in big cities or metropolitan cities. But it's a possibility that I could be posted in North India for a few years and then South India for the next few years. And my husband will have to accept this reality. I will only marry a boy who accepts this condition wholeheartedly, unconditionally. So that's how you can explain. And then you could be asked questions about your city, district, or taluka. Questions related to your job experience, work experience, I've already discussed that. Then moving on. Okay, questions on banking. Basic banking terms, definitions, repo, reverse repo, CRR, SLR, RTGS, NEFT, UPI, IMPS, especially fund transfers. So UPI, IMPS, NEFT, RTGS, the technicalities, the minimum amount, the maximum amounts. How does UPI work? Have you ever tried UPI? Of course, almost everyone must have tried it. So how does it work? If you can explain this by giving a detailed answer, maybe you can speak for 25-30 seconds. The panel members will be very impressed. And then current events related to banking frauds, like recently the ABG shipyard fraud, RBI monetary policy, the decision to have a central bank digital currency, that's a possibility. So that's related to banking and technology. Situation based question. So I had spoken about this at the start of the session. Suppose you're working as an IT officer and another employee, maybe your boss or maybe the chief manager or the AGM asks for your ID and password. Will you share it with him? Suppose your boss asks for access to data which he is not supposed to have. What will you do? So this is a situation based question. How will you secure data on a local computer? So you can take a backup on a local USB flash drive, or maybe you can back it up to the cloud. You can encrypt the data locally while backing up to the cloud or on the USB flash drive. You can encrypt it. You can protect it with a password as well. So these are some of the ways you can secure the data. So situation-based questions. Then detailed banking questions. So what do I mean by detailed banking questions? You need to explain certain things. Like for example, how does RBI control inflation by changing the policy rates? How is inflation managed by RBI through policy rates and reserve ratios? Explain. Or the previous thing, what do you think about bank privatization? So it's related to banking. You have to explain in detail. What are the advantages and disadvantages of privatization? And then union budget, of course, major announcements at least related to technology, startups, various schemes, Stand Up India, Startup India, Startup Seed India scheme. There are many initiatives, there have been many initiatives taken by the current government for boosting or promoting the startup culture in India. So you should be able to name a few schemes, the salient features of those schemes, and any special announcements in the budget regarding technology and startups. Read up on cryptocurrencies, blockchain, NFTs. So this is actually technology, computers, banking, all together combined. You could be asked questions on farm laws and farmer protests, questions on rising fuel prices. Another important thing, social media. So privacy on the internet, social media, freedom of speech online, etc. And then of course questions related to COVID and lockdown. So broadly speaking, this is what you should study. Yes, technical questions. Many of you are asking about technical questions. So mainly computer networks and information security, number one, computer networks and information security. Second, system administration, focusing on user roles. Then some amount of data structures and database management. So you could be asked questions on databases and data structures. I have never heard any candidate saying, for the IT officer interview, saying that he or she was told to write a program for something, code during the interview. So don't worry about programming or coding, but this is very important. Computer networks, the number one important thing. Read as much as possible on computer networks and information security. General questions, current topics, etc. So that's it. There's a batch for this IBPS SO interview. The batch is actually focused on the AFO interviews. I just wanted to have this common session for those who are appearing for the IT officer interviews. In the batch, we are actually focusing on the AFO interviews. But if you join the batch, I'll be more than happy to conduct mock interviews. So you'll find the banking part and the GK part useful for all sorts of interviews. The agriculture part probably won't be useful to you, but I won't be covering IT questions. So this part I won't be covering in the interview batch. But banking, general knowledge and current affairs, Nikhil sir, there's a separate teacher for it, and he's a very well-known and very capable teacher. He'll cover banking and general knowledge and current affairs. I'll cover the personal HR part. After this, I'll focus more on the one-on-one private mock interviews, counseling sessions. Because see, this typically for the interviews, there's no point in having these general sessions, generally discussing questions and answers. The answers should be very specific. They should be tailored, customized according to your profile and background. So my focus is more on personal interaction. So I set up a Zoom meeting with each candidate. We discuss the profile first. I suggest a few questions. Then you are supposed to prepare answers to those questions, and then we have these mock interviews. So anyway, if you're interested, you can do it. And even if you don't join any interview batch, please feel free to post your queries in the comments section. I'll be more than happy to reply to your queries. If you have any other questions, if you want to ask any queries personally, this is my personal number. Guys, please don't call. You can WhatsApp me your questions. I'm busy throughout the day conducting mock interviews. So I was busy with NICL sessions, AO sessions, then sessions for SBI PO. Now I'm busy with IBPS PO mock interviews, then SO interviews. So it's very difficult for me to answer your calls. So please message, WhatsApp your queries. I'll try my best to answer them. Okay. So thank you very much for attending this session. The batch will be conducted. See, sessions on banking and general knowledge and current affairs would be a mix of English and Hindi. We generally don't use Marathi in our batches. But for the AFO, personal questions, HR questions part, I'll use Marathi, just for the AFO part. For IT officer and marketing officer, I'll stick to English. But I'm not going to conduct any more general sessions. These I'll be conducting private sessions, personal one-on-one sessions through Zoom or Google Meet with the students of that batch. So I'm comfortable with English, Hindi and Marathi. You can use any language to communicate with me. The interviews for the IT officer are generally conducted in English. If you're not comfortable with English, you can answer in Hindi. I can discuss your questions and answers in Hindi, but I would highly recommend using English for the interview. So that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending. See you soon. Jai Hind.